softens and your thoughts begin to slow. Imagine yourself standing at the edge of a quiet meadow, the kind of meadow that rolls out like a gentle blanket, green and gold and soft under a sky that holds the last pale light. The air is mild and steady. The sound is a low murmur rather than a crowd, a close, steady hush. And at the heart of it all, there is a rhythm that is older than the footpaths and fences and the names we give to flowers. It is the mellow repetition of wings and petals, of bees and blooms, and the peaceful timing that guides their small, careful meetings. Still awake, comment the secret word, nebula, as you get cozy. If this calm, sleepy science helps you drift off, you can gently tap like and subscribe, and if you wish, use the playlist link in the description so the learning continues softly in the background while you rest. Imagine yourself breathing in and out, the chest rising like a slow tide. The meadow breathes with you, a living quilt of stems and seeds and dew. The gentle rhythm continues. At the first touch of dawn in this meadow, the light arrives as a hush rather than an event. It spreads in pale blue and silver, threading over the grass, pooling in shallow hollows, and slowly collecting along the blades that hold tiny beads of dew. Each droplet is a small lens, turning the world upside down and back again. You can almost feel the coolness of it on your fingertips as you trail your hand through the low plants, careful and unhurried. In this softened light, the flowers are not fully awake yet. Their petals are partly closed or folded, their colours as though they have been washed with milk. Even the clover heads look muted, as though they are thinking about opening rather than committing. Some pollinators stir early. Bumblebee queens are often among the first. They are larger than their workers and carry a quiet warmth within their fuzzy bodies. They can shiver their wing muscles to raise their core temperature, so they venture out before others dare, moving with slow assurance over the cool blooms. If you imagine the meadow from above, bumblebee paths in the morning are like threads stitched on cool fabric, connecting warmer pockets near sunlit stones, dark soil, and the facing sides of flowers that have turned a little toward the first light. The gentle rhythm continues as she moves, pausing, hovering low, then settling, the flower nodding with her weight. Flowers also keep time. Their opening and closing follow their own clocks. Each species offers its tiny stage at a certain hour, like a schedule that stretches across the day. Chicory often opens early, its blue discs yawning wide in the cool of the morning, while dandelions sweep open as the sun rises, their bright faces like small suns within the larger sky. Bindweed unrolls pale trumpets, and the big ox-eye daisies open their white spokes around a warm yellow centre. Heliotropes and young sunflower heads turn subtly with the light, and although they may seem still, they are gently aligning their faces, arranging their geometry for visiting insects. chemistry. Imagine yourself kneeling to look more closely at one bloom. A hoverfly drifts into view. Even in early morning, some hoverflies patrol, wearing the bright yellow and black that mimics wasps and Dita's hungry eyes. Their wings beat so fast they blur into glass. They hold themselves steady above a flower, then drop gently down, their small feet touching like careful steps on a polished floor. Hoverflies carry pollen on their bodies, rather than in the specialized baskets that bees possess. They wipe their faces with their forelegs and taste with their feet. The gentle rhythm continues, a hovering, a landing, a sip, and a lift, repeated along a string of blooms. Bees, in contrast, are built as though the meadow invented them for its own purposes. Their bodies are covered with branched hairs that catch pollen like velvet catching dust. The pollen itself is not just dust. It is a complex, nutritious cargo shaped by the plant's ancestry. Under a microscope, each grain is a sculpture. Some are globes with spiky exine, some are smooth ellipsoids, some are triangular at the poles. Each carries its own pattern, like the printed surface of a small globe. When a bee lands, a subtle electric field forms between her and the flower. She often carries a slight positive charge from flight. The flower has a different charge. The pollen jumps, a vanishingly small leap across a hair's breadth, guided by physics that simply does what physics does, with no drama, only inevitability. You follow the slow path of the morning as it widens into day. The sunlight warms your shoulders. The meadow's colours deepen. The clover turns from pastel to a richer pink. The buttercups seem to gather a quiet shine. You notice how bees prefer certain colours. Many see primarily in ultraviolet blue and green, unlike our eyes that love red. To a bee, a flower's centre may glow as a dark nectar, guide in ultraviolet, a bullseye that shows where to land. To us, it is simply yellow, but to them, it is a signpost. The gentle rhythm continues as one bee decelerates, her legs reaching, her landing practiced and restrained. Honeybees leave their hive as the sun builds warmth. They orient themselves to the light, using the sun as a compass and the polarized patterns that crisscross the sky, even behind thin cloud. Inside their bodies, a clock ticks, influenced by light and by their own schedule of work. They learn the times when certain flowers open and when they are richest, and they return to those times like musicians coming back to a motif. If they find a good patch, they tell others with a quiet waggle dance, a small figure eight on the vertical comb back home. The angle of their run aligns with the sun's position. The duration whispers the distance. In the meadow, this choreography becomes a rise in activity, a subtle swelling of the hum near the flowers that were most generous that morning. The gentle rhythm continues, within and between bodies, between hive and field, between memory and air. Around mid-morning, the diversity of the meadow starts to show itself in movement. Small, solitary bees flicker low along the ground, seeking flowers close to the grass. Mining bees, mason bees, leaf-cutter bees, each with their particular preferences and their narrow windows of the year, take small, straight flights. as if they are reading a schedule that no one else can see. Some prefer flowers with shallow cups, some can handle deeper tubes, their tongues curled and uncurled like a soft spring. Long-tongued bumblebees reach into tubular corollas that others cannot, and short-tongued species focus on more open blooms. This partitioning is not rigid. It is flexible and soft, like a row of seats in a quiet amphitheatre where each visitor settles where they are most comfortable, and there is nearly always room. As the sun warms, the wing beats become a chorus. Honeybees beat their wings around 200 to 250 times a second in level flight. Bumblebees, larger and fuzzier, beat a little slower, the pitch lower, a rounder sound. Butterflies arrive with the floating rhythm of banners in a slow breeze. Their wings are scales arranged in rows that fall away in the lightest touch, leaving a tiny dusting on your fingertip if one settles there for an instant. They come to sip nectar, unfurling the proboscis like a springy, delicate straw, then coiling it back again when they lift away. Skippers dart with short, quick strokes. Meadow browns cruise slowly across open patches. Fritillaries shimmer in patterns of burnt orange and cream. Butterflies are mostly diurnal, and they love warmth. They bask, angling their wings to catch light and heat up their flight muscles. If a cloud passes, you see them rest on a warm stone, wings slightly open, soaking in what they can until the sun returns. Their eyes see colors differently from bees and differently from us, but the logic is the same. They search for the right shapes, the right patterns, the right invitations, and they respond, measuring with their senses as though reading a quiet script written across the meadow. Beetles traverse the stems with firm, straightforward steps. Some are pollen eaters, clambering inside larger, open flowers, knocked faintly with pollen, moving with a plodding patience that contrasts with the lightness of the flies. Their contribution is older than many other pollinators. Beetle pollination is an ancient partnership. Flies in general, beyond the hoverflies, contribute in numbers. Clustered heads like yarrow and cow parsley offer a flat table for many feet, and small flies, with a taste for the simple and the accessible, share that space along with tiny wasps and ants that sometimes pause to drink. Imagine yourself moving slowly to the meadow's edge, where a hedgerow filters the wind and creates pockets of warmer air. The shade there holds a cool scent, the smell of leaves and damp soil, while the outer edge glows with light. You can feel the difference on your skin, a slight chill in shade, a softness in sun. Bees sense this too. Their metabolism responds to temperature. There is a threshold below which flight is not efficient. Bumblebees can cross that threshold with their internal heating, and for them, a cool morning is an opportunity to visit blooms before competition arrives. Honeybees prefer a warmer start, and when the air finally suits them, they fill the meadow with their patient lined flights, low over the grass and high over the flowers. The gentle rhythm continues, a steady exchange of movement for nectar, of nectar for pollen transport, of pollen transport for seeds to come. Between the plants and their visitors, signals drift like breath. Scents bloom and curl, squeeze concentration rising as she moves closer to a source. In the midday calm, when the air is stable, the trails are clearer. You notice bees moving more directly then, choreographies of efficiency. When air stirs and tumbles, they adjust, sampling and correcting, performing gentle loops and arcs that keep them near a favorable direction without ever deviating too far. You can hear, if you are very still, the subtle changes in pitch as different insects pass, the rising and falling of their wing beats as they climb and descend. Inside the flowers, pollen waits. Some plants, like certain wild peas and vetches, rely on visitors to trigger the release of pollen, a tiny mechanical encouragement where a slight weight or a gentle vibration completes the ritual. Others open freely, offering dust like a light seasoning on the air. Buzz pollination is a special case. Some flowers keep their pollen inside tubular anthers that must be vibrated to spill it out. Bumblebees excel at this. They hold on to the flower, unhook their wings from their flight stroke, and vibrate their muscles at a frequency that loosens the pollen-like flower through a sieve. The sound is distinct. It is a deeper, deliberate thrum, held steady for a couple of heartbeats, then released. Not every meadow plant is built for buzz pollination, but where it is used, the match between visitor and bloom feels like a lock opening to a key of pure sound. At midday the sun lies high and wide, and the meadow seems to slow. Heat softens edges, and you might notice fewer bees on the very hottest afternoons. Honeybees send water collectors to ponds and damp soil, the carriers returning to the hive, where droplets are spread and fanned to cool the brood. A quiet, communal air conditioning that further demonstrates the rhythm of work. In the meadow, this may be invisible, but you feel the lull, and in that lull the butterflies and hoverflies gain proportion. They shine a little brighter in the clear light, perching and rotating their bodies to maintain the right temperature, their metabolism like a small, carefully tended flame in a windless room. Now imagine the scent as it changes with heat. Floral volatiles are like soft musical notes, evaporating and carrying differently as the air warms. Linalool, benzaldehyde, eugenol, methyl salicylate, small molecules with names that sound like a quiet chemistry class, weave together into perfume. Some notes are released more strongly at midday, some at the approach of dusk. The change is gentle, but the insects listen with their antennae, which are covered in pores and sensilla, small sensory organs that bring minute signals inward. They follow these cues steadily, like a reader tracing a line with a finger, unhurried and attentive. The gentle rhythm continues as we step forward through time, not needing to hurry or to count the minutes. Between visits, you might notice how certain flowers slowly close. Dandelions fold their heads as light wanes. The chicory that started the day open blue may have closed by noon, finished for the day. Other flowers begin a fresh opening. Evening primrose the same way, in daytime, the flat, bright daisies and clustered umbels aim at bees and flies. Form and function join, not as a rule book, but as a set of nudges that has settled into place over time. Some bees are solitary and nest in the ground. In the meadow, you may see tiny volcanoes of crumbly soil with round entrances. A mining bee slips in and out, provisioning a nest with pollen mixed with nectar for the larvae to feed on when eggs hatch. Another species nests in hollow stems or holes in a fence post, lining each cell with cut leaves or resin gathered from plants. Their lives follow the season. Many are on the wing for just a few weeks, aligned with the specific flowers their larvae will later need. This is another rhythm, a wider one than the day, where emergence is a note and senescence is a rest. The gentle rhythm continues, scales played across days and weeks. In the middle hours of the afternoon, the light grows warmer, a gold poured lightly over green. Shadows elongate and complex patterns appear under the taller stems of grass. You may see dragonflies, not pollinators, but part of the meadow's airy dance, patrolling like silver blue needles. The bees become content to finish their work, returning with fuller pollen baskets packed against their legs, the colour of those loads reflecting the flowers visited, bright yellow from dandelions or buttercups, orange from poppies, a pale grey from willow herb, each pigment a quiet record of the foraging route. Pollen is protein, nectar is carbohydrate. Bees need both, just as a body needs both rest and fuel. The mixture makes brewed food, royal jelly, wax, and the energy to fly home and out again. You find yourself noticing how each movement is a small decision. A bee approaches a flower, hovers, senses, lands, turns, extends her tongue, tastes, decides again whether to continue or lift off. These decisions are micro-thoughts, guided by memory and by immediate sensory input. Bees learn through reinforcement. If a certain flower yields a good reward, they are more likely to visit similar ones. They may even learn to prefer a certain orientation or a certain pattern of spots. This learning is not dramatic or emotional. It is quiet and simply practical, like learning the way to a faucet that runs at just the right speed. As the day softens toward evening, the composition of visitors shifts. Moths begin to appear as the light dips and the colours of the meadow redshift under the sinking sun. You might first notice a white flutter low over the grass, then a darker moth hovering with a surprising strength by a flower that has opened late. Many moths are sturdy flyers. Some are quick hoverers that sip from deep-throated blooms, holding themselves steady in the manner of tiny hummingbirds. The flowers that court moths often release stronger scents at this hour. They may be pale to be more visible in low light, and their nectar may be placed in deeper wells, tailored to a long proboscis that coils like a ribbon when not in use. The gentle rhythm continues, but the notes change, and the emphasis shifts to another group of visitors with their own clock. Night comes quietly. Stars appear gradually, more like a soft disclosure than a switch. The meadow cools. The hum dwindles, never fully gone, but softer. Most of the bees sleep, clinging to stems with their mandibles, bodies still, the breath inside them slow. Some male bees sleep communally on a favoured twig, a small cluster of soft, silent forms that look like ornaments at rest. The flowers that closed are closed now. Those that open to the dark will continue to offer their small sweets until they, too, tire and fold. The gentle rhythm continues, and within it the meadow holds its breath and then releases, holds and releases as the hours pass. The rhythms of a single day are nested in rhythms of a season. Imagine yourself visiting this meadow in early spring. The grasses are short. The soil holds the memory of frost. The earliest blossoms are small, low, and bright. Coltsfoot fans out yellow discs from tight buds. Violets hide in shaded corners. Willow catkins along the meadow's edge overflow with pollen and nectar when little else is available. Early bumblebee queens come awake from winter rest and need energy. They fly low and slow, tasting, gauging, and between sips, seeking a nest site under dry grass, in an old mouse nest, or beneath a tussock. Mining bees that match the early bloom emerge as well. Their timing is not exact to the day, but to the window, waiting for the right soil warmth and the right floral cues. You feel the clarity of that early air, the clean scent of new growth, the thin sunlight that cuts with a gentle blade through coolness. Then in late spring, the meadow is taller. New flowers rise, harebells tremble on delicate stems, buttercups shine like polished cups, catching highlights. Red clovers and birdsfoot trefoil unfold their compound blooms, feeding long-tongued bees and short-tongued ones alike. You would notice hoverflies now in greater number, and larger butterflies, perhaps a peacock or small tortoiseshell or a painted lady, depending on region, their eye spots resembling eyes, a safety in pattern as ancient as feathers. The gentle rhythm continues as brood fills the nests, as larvae feed and curl and pupate, as cycles within cycles advance. High summer plays the meadow in full swells. The grasses are at shoulder height. Thistles offer complex bristled heads that bumblebees adore. Knapweeds and scabious and wild marjoram and knotted vetch hold steady through the hottest days, offering repeated promise to returning visitors. Honeybee colonies are large now, organized with a calm that feels like habit, a system practiced through hundreds of days and thousands of bodies. The hum of the field is steady and broad. If you close your eyes, it is like the sound of a distant shore, a white noise with a soft, friendly tone. You might drift on that sound the way a boat provisioning and seal the nests. Those cells will hold the next generation through winter, the larvae slowly, silently changing behind protective walls of leaf and mud. The gentle rhythm continues, tapered but intact, with the memory of warmth held like a seed. In winter, the meadow rests in earnest. The flowers place their energy into roots and crowns. The stems stand like quiet lines drawn in frost, their seed heads sprinkled with a white dusting. The hum is gone. The hush is deeper. Underground, pupae wait, juveniles wait, queens wait. The plants clock slow, but they never stop. Light still arrives and leaves on schedule. Temperature rises and falls. The soil shifts with ice and thaw. Deep inside buds, preformed leaves are set like folded papers, ready to open when warmth returns. There is a sense of pause, but not of absence. The rhythm is muted but present, like a heartbeat felt through a pillow. Still awake, comment the secret word, harbour. Return now to the day rhythm and imagine the fine structure that underlies it, the clocks within bodies that keep time even without a watch. Bees have circadian rhythms, tuned by light and temperature. Proteins rise and fall in cycles within their cells, a molecular dance that builds and dissolves with a period close to 24 hours. This internal timing affects when bees are most responsive to certain scents and tastes. If a patch of flowers offers the best nectar at mid-morning, a bee that learns that will return at the right hour, her physiology ready to taste and respond. Plants have clocks as well. The genes that control opening and closing of flowers have periods and phases. The hygroscopic movement of petals, the opening of stomata, the synthesis and release of floral scent, all follow signals that mirror the day's light. Even in constant conditions, though they remain entrained to sunrise and sunset in the wild. The meadow is also patterned in space. Microclimates form under shrubs, along stone walls, in dips where cool air gathers, and on small rises where the wind brushes clean the standing air. Each microclimate shapes who visits and when. A bloom that warms by an extra degree becomes a more attractive breakfast stop for a bumblebee. A cluster of flowers in a sheltered hollow smells stronger because their scent stays gathered. The hedgerow with its mixed leaves and blossoms offers corridors for flying insects and windbreaks for resting. A shallow pond at the edge draws water collectors and becomes a map reference that bees memorize, a landmark that anchors their mental map of the field. Pollinator navigation is grounded in several senses. The sun compass is strong when the sun is high. When clouds cover it, patterns of polarized light provide direction. Landmarks fill in the fine details. Bees fly a path called a trapline, visiting a sequence of known good flowers in a loop that reduces backtracking. The loop becomes a habit, and the habit becomes a rhythm. The path is not rigid. If a better patch appears, the loop adapts. In a field of constant change, a flexible pattern conserves energy. Imagine the meadow crisscrossed with such loops, each belonging to a different bee, overlapping gently, like lines drawn with a soft pencil. Pollen transfer is a gentle mechanical ritual. When a bee moves across the surface of a flower, some pollen grains stick to the hairs on her thorax and legs. Some are brushed onto specialized structures, like the corpiculae on her hind legs. On another flower, the pollen brushes the stigma, the receptive part of the pistil, which is often sticky or feathery. A pollen grain hydrates, germinates, and extends a tube, travelling down to the ovary, where fertilization can occur. This process can be swift in botanical terms, but it is entirely silent to us, hidden within tissues that look, on the outside, unchanged from 1 minute to the next. The gentle rhythm continues inside cells, then inside seeds as they begin to form, the promise of new plants written in a patient script. Each species of flower in the meadow writes its invitations in its own way. Clover heads hold many tiny florets packed together. Each floret contributes a small drop of nectar, reached best by a bee with a long enough tongue. Some shorter-tongued bees bite small holes near the base, a form of nectar robbing that bypasses the usual route. Even this has a rhythm, often performed by consistent species at consistent times. Scabious holds wide discs with protruding pins, orderly and convenient for generalist visitors. Thistles host a crowd, their spiny shields protecting the nectar at the base from larger intruders, while welcoming bees and butterflies whose feet are light and whose bodies can slide between the gears of bracts. If you move in your mind to another meadow, perhaps in higher mountains where the season is shorter, the same rhythms play, but faster, as if the year is a smaller watch wound tightly in spring. Alpine bumblebees fly on cool days with purpose. Flowers open in a burst, offering a heavy wave of nectar and pollen to be harvested and distributed, to ensure seeds are set before frost returns. In a desert wash after rain, the rhythm is sudden. Blooms appear by the thousands, and bees wait in the soil for years to emerge during favourable windows. The meadow's rhythm here is an episodic pulse rather than a steady drum. In the tropics, near a warm forest edge, the rhythm can be constant, with small day-to-day variations and a wider annual pulse tied to rains. The gentle rhythm continues, adjusted to place, expanded or compressed to suit the climate's script. Back in the original meadow, you watch, in your imagination, the electrostatic dance play out over and over. When a bee flies, friction with air builds a positive charge on her body. Flowers have a negative potential relative to the air around them. The difference is small, but sufficient to pull pollen grains into contact. Some studies even suggest that bees can sense the electric field of a flower and detect whether it has recently been visited by another bee. A visited flower's electric profile is subtly different for a short time. This helps bees avoid empty blooms and choose those with a better chance of nectar. It is another layer of information in a field of signals, adding to colour, scent, shape, and memory. Imagine the textures underfoot. The grass has a soft resistance, a fine spring underlaid by firmness. Stems of yarrow are feathery and give way easily when brushed. Foxglove leaves, if they are present at the meadow's margins, are thick ever stood in. The air holds differently on your skin than on the flowers. On petals, it beads and slides. On hairs and bracts and pollen, it catches and holds. Each surface negotiates with moisture in its own manner, and that negotiation influences how quickly scent evaporates and how petals open and close. As evening returns again in our slow cycle, take a moment to listen inside the silence. Moths work along a different map, guided by scents that seem louder at night and by faint light from the sky. Even starlight can be enough for orientation. Some moths respond to polarization patterns as well. Their eyes are adapted to low light, collecting photons in ways that sharpen the softest faintness into usable signals. Many nocturnal flowers are white or pale yellow, standing out under moon and starlight. The match between pale flowers and night pollinators feels like a quiet agreement, signed each day anew without words. The gentle rhythm continues, and the meadow at night is a place of patience and small persistent errands. The day returns, again and again, and with it the old familiar meetings. In this repetition, the meadow gathers experience. A bee that learned a path uses it again. A flower that was rewarded by a certain visitor is more likely to produce more of the scent and nectar that attract that visitor within the limits of its physiology and energy. Across years, in the slow time scale of evolution, traits that make these meetings more efficient can be selected and amplified. Tubes may lengthen or shorten. Colours may shift toward what the common visitors see best. Scents may change in timing or intensity. The gentle rhythm continues across generations, and the meadow's composition tilts toward a mosaic that works well in place and time. Beyond the meadow, other partners exist. In warm places, hummingbirds with their elastic tongues and iridescent bodies manage deep tubular corollas with consummate ease, offering pollination services to flowers that open high above the ground. In desert nights, bats travel long distances, dusted with pollen, as they feed on cactus blooms that open wide under the stars. These are different notes in the same song, further examples of the alignment between the timing of floral openings and the waking hours of their intended visitors. Even within our meadow, the variations are gentle reminders that ecology is not a single melody, but a polyphony, with themes braided and unbraided, each part quiet enough not to crowd the others. If you return your attention to the bees, imagine the sensation of their body heat. In cool air, a bumblebee on a flower is a small, warm weight. If you place your palm near, you might feel the faintest radiance, the warmth of sugar being burned to fuel muscle. They are often patient on a blossom, working around the disc, collecting what they need, ensuring they brush the stigma. Honeybees are more numerous, and their presence is an average rather than a series of individuals. One honeybee and another are not the same, but for our purposes here, they merge into a gentle, consistent hum, like the sound of falling sand from a long distance. The science of their wings is quietly satisfying. A bee's wings do not flap like a bird's across a wide arc. Instead, they rotate and twist demonstration of muscles that have practiced this 1,000 times. Pollen tastes of plant and season. To the bee, it is not only a protein source, but also a set of signals about plant health and species identity. Some pollen carries compounds that deter non-specialist herbivores. Most pollinators are not harmed by the concentrations present. Some are even subtly encouraged to focus on certain flowers by the presence of traces of caffeine or other compounds which can enhance memory in bees at low levels. Nectar is not only sugar water either. Small amounts of secondary metabolites can slow microbial growth and preserve sweetness. Yeasts and bacteria nonetheless find their way into nectar, subtly altering taste and scent, forming micro-communities that add another layer of complexity to the meadow's chemistry. You might imagine, as you lie back mentally on a patch of dry grass, that the entire meadow is like a slow, careful clock, but a clock that tolerates variation, that expects clouds and wind and cool mornings and hot afternoons, that makes room for pauses and missteps. It is not rigid, it is regular and forgiving, which is perhaps the most relaxing way a system can be. There is always another day. If a flower is missed in the morning, another visitor will come later. If a bee's trap line is interrupted by a gust of wind, she will circle, reconnoiter, and find her way back to the scent plume. The gentle rhythm continues, and in that continuation, sleep finds an easy path. Imagine now walking to a slight rise in the meadow, where a single birch or hawthorn lifts its canopy. Below it, the air is different, and the ground holds a mix of sun lovers and shade lovers. Along the boundary, you see species that prefer the margins. Wild raspberries or brambles flower along the hedgerow and host bees that favour their cup-like blossoms. Hawthorn flowers in spring with a flush of white, then gives way to elderflowers and later to ivy, an important late-season nectar source for many insects. The sequence is like a calendar of drinks set out across months, each week bringing a different pitcher to the table. The wind in the meadow can be a gentle editor, deciding which readers can turn which pages. Small bees avoid heavy wind. They hug the ground or stay within the lee of taller plants. Larger bees power through, choosing more sheltered routes if possible. Butterflies adjust their angle, sometimes landing to wait out a change. Many flowers lean slightly in a prevailing direction, and this tilt can protect nectaries and pollen from rain. On damp mornings, the dew on the petals can dilute nectar, but as the air dries, concentration returns. Visitors know this implicitly. They prefer, when they can, times when the reward is of the right thickness. The physics of evaporation and the biology of desire meet quietly in a droplet a few millimeters across. At your feet, small ants follow their own lines. Ants are not major pollinators in most meadows, because nectar is often placed beyond their easy reach, and because their visiting habits do not tend to deposit pollen where it needs to be. Even so, in some flowers, especially near the ground, ants do transfer pollen as a side effect of their foraging. It is an occasional service, performed without ceremony. Beetles too provide pollination while eating pollen directly. The plants that most of them share a longer, slower relationship, accepting some loss of pollen for the benefit of reliable contacts. Watch too for the rhythm of seed and fruit. After pollination, fertilization yields seeds that develop within the ovary. The petals fade, then fall. The flower head dries. In composite flowers like daisies and asters, the seed heads take on a new life, their ribbed achenes arranged in patterns of spirals that approximate the numbers of a sequence known for centuries, a pattern that may simply be the most efficient way to pack seeds. Wind takes some, birds take some, gravity takes the rest. In grasses, the seeds are small and numerous, a rain of grains over the seasons, feeding small mammals in turn, and so the meadow passes food along different paths, not only by nectar and pollen, but also by the legibility of sustaining matter. In the hive, darkness and warmth provide a smooth backdrop for the bees' work. The comb is built in hexagons that conserve wax and provide strength. The cells angle slightly upward to prevent nectar from dripping out before it is turned into honey. Bees' hair must layer itself into a usable map of signals. These processes are automatic, unforced. We often imagine that nature struggles or fights to continue, but often it simply waits and proceeds. The quiet act of waiting is part of the rhythm too. Move your imagination to soil level again and think of the nest cells of solitary bees. A leafcutter bee cuts ovals from leaves with remarkable smoothness and precision, carrying them back beneath her body, flying like a small green-fringed comma back to her nest. She lines the cell, patterns the layers like a little paper mill, and seals it when it is full with a circular piece that fits like a lid. The craftsmanship is quiet and exact, measured by instinct and practice. Inside, her provision mass will be consumed by a larva that will then change into something that looks first like a little curled crescent, then into a pupa, then into a bee that differs completely from the first shape in function and form. This change is a slow, transformations taking place without fanfare, and it is one reason the meadow can be trusted to return with new workers and new lines each spring. A subtle rhythm also connects day length and physiology. As nights lengthen, hormones shift in plants and in insects. In plants, phytochromes measure relative amounts of red and far red light, providing information about day length. This informs flowering time in some species, ensuring that buds open in favorable conditions. Bees and other insects have their own mechanisms to detect seasonal change. The lengthening and shortening of days can cue diapause, the pause in development that carries them over winter. These processes do not clamour. They do not require our attention to operate. They serve the same function as a blanket pulled more tightly in cool weather or kicked off when it warms, automatic and comforting. Imagine the geometry of the meadow in late afternoon. Sunlight slants through the stems, illuminating the fine hairs on the underside of leaves. Small spiders have spun threads between grasses, and dew later will bead along them like a string of pearls. A bee brushes one such line and adjusts without effort. No distress, your own breath has settled into it, long and even. There is a quiet interplay between abundance and attention in the meadow. When flowers are numerous, bees can afford to be selective. They specialize more, becoming faithful to certain species for a time, a behavior called constancy. This improved constancy increases pollination efficiency because bees carry pollen where it is needed most to the same kind of flower. When blooms are scarce, bees become generalists, taking what is available. Both strategies work. Both can exist within a single day, a single meadow, perhaps even a single bee. It is a flexible approach to a world that shifts under light and wind and shadow. At the very edge of the meadow, perhaps a stream runs. Water talks in a low voice, over stones smoothed by seasons. Water's presence cools the air nearby, and plants that prefer damp soil gather along the banks, offering different flavors and shapes. Mint releases a clean scent when brushed. Forget-me-nots tilt tiny blue faces up, their pale yellow centers like small suns. Bees come to drink water as well, not for the taste, but for the function. They prefer shallow edges, where they can stand and sip. You can imagine one bee stepping carefully onto dark sand, leaning her hexagonal toes against tiny grains as she sips and then lifts away, leaving only the faintest indentation. Some days, the meadow has company overhead. Swallows work in long loops, stitching circles through the upper air as they catch small flies and gnats. They are drawn by the same pulses that bring hoverflies and mosquitoes. The presence of swallows is an indirect measure of the insect pulse, an echo of the meadow's hum moved several meters higher. Bats will trace similar arcs at night, guided by echolocation, their mouths open just enough to send out small signals that bounce back with information about size and distance. These aerial paths are also rhythms that overlap the floral rhythms, and they remind us that meadows are layered spaces, their invisible architecture populated at many levels. You might notice that the way bees move across the meadow has the quality of a gentle algorithm, a list of simple rules that produce complex patterns. Start from home. Fly toward a remembered patch. If a scent plume becomes stronger, follow it. If not, adjust. If a flower yields, continue. If not, move to the next. If lost, circle. If weather shifts, shelter. These are not thoughts articulated as we would articulate them. They are embedded in bodies and played out in muscle and nerve. The emergent pattern is elegant, but it arises without drama, like frost patterns on a window or ripples on a pond after a pebble is dropped. Your mind might drift now to larger cycles still. Beyond seasons, climates and landscapes shift and sway slowly. The composition of a meadow changes as the soil enriches or depletes, as grazers visit or are absent, as hedgerows are trimmed or allowed to widen. Some flowers prefer to colonize open ground. Others move in when competition eases. The pollinator community shifts with them, gently and usually without abrupt breaks. The mutual trust between plant and pollinator is not absolute, but it is resilient in many places, turning like a mobile in very slow air, adjusting angles, moving smoothly around new centers of balance. A few moments to think about color. Human eyes find red easy to love, and we plant gardens with geraniums and poppies that glow like embers. Bees, lacking receptors for red, find their attractions elsewhere. Blue and ultraviolet mark maps for them. Many flowers have patterns invisible to us that become obvious in bee vision. Landing strips that guide to nectar, darker centers that echo like a drum. You can imagine a painter who layers two paintings on a single canvas, one visible in the usual light, another revealed only by a certain lamp. The meadow holds both at once, and the bees read the hidden layer as fluently as we read the visible. The shapes of flowers also encode invitations. Tubes hold nectar, safe from evaporation and from smaller thieves. Spurred blossoms curl nectar into narrow channels. Flat discs offer open platforms. Bells and cups invite certain tongues and discourage others. In some species, the pollen is presented on levers that brush onto the visitor in a specific place, a forehead or a thorax, ensuring that it will touch the appropriate part of the next flower. The engineering is made of living tissue, so each mechanism is soft and forgiving. It can be bent a little without breaking. It can be used many times without wearing out. The gentle rhythm continues, powered by sugars and sunlight, calibrated by genetics and practice. Picture now the air as a transparent river, with distances marked not in meters, but in gradients of odor and warmth. Bees move through this river with ease born of repetition. Their antennae taste the flow, their ocelli sense general brightness, their compound eyes map patterns. The field is not empty. It is filled with information the way a page is filled with words. You feel a calm satisfaction at this thought, because the busyness, though present, is not urgent. It is steady and self-correcting. The meadow's signals are as forgiving as they are abundant. A note on sounds. If you were to record the meadow, you would capture wing beats that tremble on the edge of pitch, a near constant band around a few hundred hertz. Layered on this are chirps and rustles and the low hush of wind in grass. The amplitude rises and falls with sun and shade, but rarely is there silence. Even in the quietest hour before dawn, there is motion. A beetle turns under a leaf. A slug progresses along a stem. A tiny moth adjusts on the underside of a blade of grass. These are near silent, but not nothing. The world of the meadow is a place where stillness is never absolute, and stillness is not required for rest. Rest arrives in the repetition, in the predictability, in the soft, forgiving routine. In the long arc of days, pollinator community composition also shows rhythms. Some years are good for hoverflies, and their numbers swell, drawn by conditions that favored their larval food sources. Some years, bumblebee nests are plentiful, each with its own territory. In a particular warm, dry summer, honeybees may excel, their hives strong, their flights long. In cool springs, early queen survival is the rate-limiting step, and their early flowers become even more precious. These variations are part of the tapestry. They are not aberrations. resentment. Over time, a balance forms that is not a fixed point, but a moving center, like the balance one finds on a slow walk along a narrow path. Sway a little left, sway a little right, and keep moving. The gentle rhythm continues, and the walking is itself the aim. Imagine the cloud shadows now, rolling over the field like slow, dark waves. As a shadow passes, temperatures drop slightly, scents adjust, the clarity of the polarized sky shifts, and insect activity changes by small degrees. The shadow moves on, warmth returns. The small changes are not signals to stop, only to modulate, and modulation is the secret of endurance. A bee who flies at one speed all day is a concept in a book. A real bee speeds up and slows down, climbs and drops, hovers and rests. A plant that opened at sunrise and closed at noon repeats the performance tomorrow, the next day, and the next, slowed by cold, hastened by heat, altered by rain only temporarily. Pollination success has its own measures. Some flowers produce fruits quickly and abundantly. Some set seed only after repeated visits. The morphology of stigma and pollen matters. Self-incompatibility systems in many species prevent self-fertilization, encouraging crosses that widen genetic diversity. The bee becomes a courier of difference as well as a courier of life. In a meadow with many overlapping species, the roots of these couriers cross and recross with a frequency that is in itself a form of safety. There are many paths to success, and few single points of failure in a habitat that is diverse and continuous. If your mind drifts to sleep for a few moments and returns, you will find the meadow unchanged. This is part of its gift. You can allow your attention to float and settle, like a pollen grain carried gently on a soft breeze before landing on a receptive surface. The story continues without you, and it welcomes you back without reproach when you return. A single bumblebee circles, a honeybee lands, a hoverfly hovers. The gentle rhythm continues. Now gently consider the idea of a single bee's day from her perspective. She leaves the hive full of intention but not of tension. She warms her muscles, tilts her abdomen, and rises. She sets a course guided by memory and by the immediate taste of the air. The first patch she aims for holds the flowers that were rich yesterday. She lands, tests, feeds, and then chooses the next. Her legs gather their loads. Her wings hold their beat. She returns to the hive when her honey stomach is full, or when her pollen baskets are rounded. There, she may trade nectar to a house bee and share information. Then she leaves again for another loop. She repeats until evening, then rests. It is a day that feels useful and iterated, and that is perhaps the most peaceful form of work. And what of the bloom's day? It begins by slowly opening, its tissues turgid with water taken up through the night. The petals spread and expose the reproductive structures. Scent releases as the temperature rises. A visitor arrives. Pollen is placed. Nectar is sipped. More visitors arrive. The bloom maintains this state until the internal tally of measures not the day's exact minutes, but the balance between costs and benefits, and it adjusts quietly around that balance. Around the meadow, stones hold warmth and release it. Dead wood in a hedgerow provides cavities for future nests. Bare patches of soil offer nesting sites for ground bees. Tall grasses welcome spiders, which in turn keep the small herbivores balanced. A few taller wildflowers rise above the rest, serving as lookouts and perches. The spatial layout of the meadow, seemingly random, is a map of opportunity. It is also a map of memory, where returning bees aim for the same high reference points and trace the same between them. The gentle rhythm continues, and in a way, this landscape is a memory palace for the small bodies that move within it, each turn a thought, each landing a note. In the long stretch of afternoon into evening, you may imagine lying down in a soft hollow. The grass supports you like an old friend. The sky lowers its brightness steadily. A single cloud becomes a grey island, then dissolves. A bee passes nearby with no interest in you. Your presence part of the meadow now, a non-disruptive shape. Your breath aligns with the slow hum. Warm insect bodies pass over cool leaves, each adjusting the other gently. The world is as it should be, and the mind rests. When we say the rhythm is mellow, we mean it is marked by repetition without monotony. Each day is similar enough to be familiar and different enough to be fresh. The pattern is stable and adaptive. The bees and blooms do not strive for novelty. They aim for repeatable success, for the sweet balance that makes more of themselves possible. This makes the meadow feel like a reliable friend, one whose stories you know and like hearing again. At the scale of centuries, humans sometimes change meadows, and the rhythm adapts where it can. Hedgerows cut back and regrow. Grazing comes and goes. Paths shift. Seeds from other places arrive on boots and in the bellies of birds. In many cases, the meadow incorporates these changes without losing its hum. The identity of the field is not tied to particular individuals, but to the pattern of many, returned each season to do similar work. The gentle rhythm continues, and this permanence of pattern can be comforting as you edge towards sleep. A last small thought about the chemistry of scent, as it is one of the softest parts of the story. Floral scents are blends designed to travel through air in ways that fit their messengers. Heavy molecules stay close, acting as close-range signals. Lighter molecules travel farther, acting as open invitations. The ratios shift with temperature and humidity. Bees can recognize the bouquet of a species, and more finely, the particular blend that indicates freshness of nectar. Each sniff is a tiny analysis, performed not in a lab, but in the space between a pair of antennae. The answer is either yes, land and sip, or no, move along. The repeated yeses make a path. The repeated no's make a different path. Both paths are gentle, with no need for any sense of loss. are more prominent now, moving like small paper boats over a dark ocean of stems. A breeze picks up and settles. Distantly, perhaps, an owl calls once. Insects respond to night in their different ways. Some rest, some begin. What remains consistent is the sleeping comfort on offer. The meadow holds its life lightly. It does not tug at you. It does not interrupt. It whispers in patterns that allow your own mind to slip free of the day's knots. The gentle rhythm continues. Imagine yourself floating a few inches above the ground, as if carried by a very quiet wind, low enough to see gloss on petals and the soft stippling of pollen on a bee's thorax. You travel the paths that bees travel, then drift over to a flower that opened just now, at the line between day and night. Your floating attention dips, touches, and lifts, as if you are an instrument gently sounding each note across a familiar scale. The next morning in your mind arrives as a soft, pale sheet. The meadow unfolds this sheet over itself. Dew collects again. The early bees stir. A robin hops and cocks its head. Again not a pollinator, but a piece of motion that belongs to the same calm. Butterflies warm themselves. The first flower you watched yesterday begins once more to open. There is no fuss and no hurry. It knows its part. Each creature knows its part. They meet again and again, each visit both new and the same. This sameness is not a lack of imagination. It is a form of love that the meadow shows to its own continuity. You find yourself now comfortably heavy, like a stone warmed by the day. If sleep comes, it comes like a bee's return to the hive, expected, deserved, and pleasing. If it does not arrive just yet, you remain